Appreciate it.
All right, back to the very latest news on the search for Nancy Guthrie, where the Pima County Sheriff's Office is confirming that all members of the Guthrie family are cleared as suspects. It comes as Sheriff Chris Nanos tells the Daily Mail that he is stuck on a motive for the abductor, saying, quote, "The motivation for it is where we get stuck, right? Is it for money? I mean, we had the one demand where they asked for money, but is it really for money or is it for revenge? For something." Forensic psychologist Dr. John Delatorre joins me now. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, a motive is your area of expertise. So when it comes to this case and the unique nature of it, what do you think?
Yeah, it's really complex. You don't really see this as a typical kind of kidnapping, which is a kidnapping for money. When you see what at least what has been presented to us as the public, it doesn't really come across that way, but it also doesn't really come across as some home invasion or burglary gone wrong. Now, a lot of that could be because the law enforcement are holding that information. But when you hear statements like this, it also seems like law enforcement is kind of stuck. It goes back to some of the announcements that they had made about wanting more information from the public. It just creates so much noise that we have a really hard time figuring out who would want to do this to her right then. And those are the questions we need to answer. Who would want to do this to her then? And once we get that, then we can start following some leads.
Yeah, you have Savannah Guthrie, who just made an appeal to the kidnapper on Instagram, saying it's never too late to do the right thing. And then there was this very different statement from President Trump yesterday, who told the New York Post that he would want the Justice Department to seek the death penalty if Nancy Guthrie was killed in this. From a psychological standpoint, these are two very different statements there. What are the effectiveness of either of those?
It depends really on the mindset of the individual right now, whoever is holding her right now. If they're in a panic state, then they might listen to whatever Savannah Guthrie is saying and hoping that she can use her power, use her influence to kind of assist in that realm. But if the person is already antisocial, which it kind of looks like, if you're willing to break into someone's house and take someone, right, take a human being, then there's a little bit of more antisociality. And so you might see what President Trump is saying, and maybe as that individual decide to push back, because who is President Trump to then try to tell me what's going to happen next? So it becomes really complicated, and whatever that person is listening to, that will determine what the next decision that they make, what behavior that they're going to make next.
Absolutely. Complicated, to say the least. Forensic psychologist Dr. John Delatorre, we appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us.
In this latest update on the search for Nancy Guthrie, the focus shifts from the how of the search to the why, the question of motive. And that matters because in many investigations, motive isn't just a detail for headlines. It can shape which leads make sense, what evidence is prioritized, and how the public interprets what's happening. First, the key facts as stated in the segment. According to the report, the Pima County Sheriff's Office has confirmed that all members of the Guthrie family have been cleared as suspects. The report also says Sheriff Nanos told the Daily Mail that investigators are stuck on a motive, specifically weighing possibilities like whether it's for money or revenge, and noting there was one demand where money was asked for. Those are the stated elements: family cleared, motive unclear, and at least one reported money demand. The segment then brings in a forensic psychologist to discuss motive, presented as an expert perspective, but still based on limited information publicly known. The psychologist says this situation doesn't look like a typical kidnapping for money, and also doesn't come across as a burglary gone wrong, based on what has been presented publicly. They also add an important caveat: law enforcement could be holding information back, and the lack of clarity can create noise, making it harder to figure out who would want to do this and why. The psychologist's central point is that investigators need answers to who would want to do that, because that's how leads become more followable. Then there's a second part of the conversation that's more about public messaging. The anchor references Savannah Guthrie making another appeal, and also mentions a statement attributed to President Trump indicating he would want authorities to seek the death penalty if Nancy Guthrie was killed. The psychologist responds cautiously. The effectiveness of either message depends on the mindset of whoever is responsible. If a person is panicked, they might respond more to a family appeal. If the person is antisocial or defiant, they might push back against a threat-heavy message, and it could complicate what they do next. The psychologist frames it as unpredictable. What the person is listening to could influence their next decision. Now, stepping into a neutral, everyday human perspective, separate from the facts, this kind of update can feel both reassuring and unsettling. It's reassuring to hear that investigators have publicly cleared the family. In a lot of high-profile cases, families can end up under intense public suspicion, so a clear statement like that may reduce speculation and allow attention to stay on leads that investigators think are more relevant. At the same time, it's unsettling to hear a sheriff describe being stuck on motive, because motive is one of those things people expect to be obvious. When it isn't, many viewers naturally feel a lack of control. If authorities can't easily categorize what happened, then the public can't either. There are also multiple reasonable ways to interpret the motive discussion without jumping to conclusions. One viewpoint is, if there was a money demand, maybe money really is the driver, and investigators just don't yet know whether it's genuine or part of something else. Another viewpoint is closer to what the psychologist suggests. Sometimes the outward signs don't fit a simple category, and that mismatch can mean either the public doesn't have the full picture or the situation is more complex than common templates like ransom or burglary. On the messaging angle, it's understandable why loved ones make appeals and why public figures make strong statements. People want to help, pressure, and deter. But the psychologist's caution also makes sense in human terms. Different messages can land differently on different people, and in some scenarios, louder threats don't automatically create better outcomes. Many people watching might think the most effective public communication is whatever increases safe tips and reduces confusion, without inflaming the situation. The calm takeaway here is that this investigation, at least as described, is still navigating major unknowns, especially motive, while also trying to manage public attention responsibly. If you're following this case, it's probably worth doing two things at once. Respect what has been confirmed and resist filling in the blanks yourself. The facts can change as investigators learn more, and until then, the most